Hello everyone and welcome to the Founder Files. Today we're going to be speaking to Christiaan van Berg from JOBJACK. It's the second time on the podcast, but now we're going to go super deep into their growth strategy. Now, if you haven't heard about JOBJACK, here's just a couple facts that'll probably impress you because they definitely impressed me. First and foremost, they are a recruitment platform for entry-level workers in South Africa. They have over 3 million users on their platform. They won the Startup Club's Startup of the Year for 2023. Raised a $2.5 million or 45 million rand pre-Series A round in October last year. They've over doubled the business to over 50 people in a year. So I think it's pretty safe to say that they've got a lot of traction and product market fit. So actually in this episode, this is what we get into. We go deep into how JOBJACK found their traction, how they selected the markets they're going to win in, how they made sure they got their user experience right. Then from a customer perspective, how they identified a repeatable set of value propositions and a sales approach that worked. How they approached their investment rounds, how they built out their operations and leadership team for scale moving now into the future. This episode is a SaaS masterclass on going from pre-product market fit to scale that you're going to want to take your notebook out for because there are so many practical insights that you're not going to want to miss.
We have about 3 million registered job seekers and about 5,000 sign up every day.
A lot of people might not know this, but you're, as the co-founders, two accountants that started a recruitment platform. So just talk to me about that in terms of how you started the business and why you picked the business that you did.
In the year that I started JOBJACK, I was doing my articles, but I was also studying part-time as well. And I got married that year.
So how did you get started on this? Because if you're talking about recruitment at an entry-level blue-collar worker perspective, right? Who's your customer?
Revisit your pricing every quarter. You need to really look at it. Are you, one, adding the value you should be, and two, is your pricing most conducive to growth, to scale, or to kind of the value prop that you're giving out there? But in the beginning, you're still figuring that out.
Welcome to the Founder Files, the podcast that's like eavesdropping on a conversation with a successful entrepreneur over a fireside chat. Join me, Cameron Coots, through this unique experience of unfiltered stories and insights from scaling founders around the globe as they share their ups, downs, and everything in between. Christiaan, welcome back to the Founder Files. I remember our last conversation being really interesting, obviously from a personal perspective, talking a lot about recruitment and recruitment processes. Now we're going to be talking about the exciting stuff around growth strategies. I can't wait to get into yours, man. But welcome back to the podcast. It's great to have you here.
Cameron, thanks so much for having me back. I really appreciate it. Always such a treat chatting with you, asking the most insightful questions and sometimes the most difficult as well. But yeah, I really just appreciate the opportunity to continue sharing our story as we grow.
Of course, man. So, obviously a lot's happened since we last spoke. You've raised your pre-Series A round in December or November, if I'm not mistaken. 45 million rand. That's not a small raise at all. And a lot's happened in the couple of months. But before I get into the details of that, because that's where a lot of the exciting conversations going to come to. I just want to go back to the early days for our listeners, right? Let's go back in terms of how JOBJACK first started and the first growth stages that you went to. So, a lot of people might not know this, but you're, as the co-founders, two accountants that started a recruitment platform. So just talk to me about that in terms of how you started the business and, why you picked the business that you did.
Cool. Yeah. Again, asking the real questions. Why are two CAs doing recruitment? I think it really started back when I was doing my accounting studies. Super privileged to be in that position and found work really easily. And I know accounting clerk is slight slave labor, but really a lot of opportunities. And I saw that my friends that were studying with me or other degrees and those that obviously weren't studying really struggled to find work. And it dawned on me that, shucks, there's a massive mismatch and gap in the way that people are finding work. And it stuck to me, but, didn't really do anything about it. I had to go take on my articles. And my family knew that this is something that was really sticking with me with regards to those around me that weren't finding opportunities as easily. And so one day my mother-in-law asked me if I can arrange a few a few friends at an event that she was helping to organize, and arranged a few guys that were still studying, and the payment came through me, and that they, after some of their friends and their friends' friends asked me if I have more of these opportunities, and that I remembered, oh yeah, shucks, unless you belong to some elite WhatsApp or Facebook group, you didn't have access to these. Let's call it, entry-level opportunities that don't require qualification above high school. So dove into a few more of those opportunities, just to see, is there really scope for this? And realized, shucks, there's a massive mismatch in employers looking for unqualified labor. And, in that, I believe always in surrounding myself with people that are better than I am. Kind of that saying, you're the average of the 5 people you surround yourself most with. And so in came my co-founder, Hein Bellingen. He was doing his articles with me, and he's got this incredible brain for systems and strategy, it's out of this world. And so I asked him to take on this journey with me. And obviously back then, we could really see the scope of what this could become, because in my, search and research, into the space, found that there's not a dominating player really taking on the space. And so from a heart's perspective, it really spoke to me, with regards to, shucks, people are missing out. And especially in South Africa, where you're faced with the world's highest unemployment rate, it's a gap that shouldn't be there. It's a real gap that, if we can just solve a part of it, then we can make a lot of impact. And hey, if there's a big opportunity added, we might as well build something big. And so that's really, where we got stuck in. And so that was actually during articles. And within a year or so, it was big enough for us to dive in full time. And so that's really kind of where our CA to recruitment went in. I think both of us went into the accounting direction not as a ends, but really as a means to an end. It gives you a lot of let's say time management qualities, and some ways of thinking that I think we sometimes take for granted with regards to your business planning or your cash flow forecasts or budgeting or so forth. So that's really kind of where it all began, from an impact and from a drive perspective, and now we're still figuring out the drive, or at least taking on the drive as it hits us.
I love that share, because I've spoken to a lot of prospective entrepreneurs who are thinking about getting into it and don't really know where to start. And the advice that I usually give to them is to think about what is a problem in the world that is important to you and frustrates you, that you believe should not be there and should be addressed and should be fixed. And this doesn't necessarily have to correlate with your skill set, but it's got to be something that you are passionate enough about that you will organically put effort into trying to solve this. And that's exactly what you've identified in the beginning with JOBJACK, because you see this recruitment problem that you encountered and the people that you cared about and your friends encountered. And then the more that you started really scratching and picking away, you realize how massive this problem is, just in terms of the people that are around you, but at a really macro societal level. And, I don't want to steal the thunder from you by saying your mission statement, but your mission statement speaks to exactly that in terms of what it is that you're trying to do. So I think I'll hand that over to you. From all that problem point, what's the mission and vision of JOBJACK?
Yeah, cool. We've got a big vision. Our vision is employ the world. And we are not naive to the fact that we are not going to employ the world. But if we can contribute to the world, being a place where everyone has an opportunity, then you're really starting to make an impact. And obviously, we've identified the segment where that's been most overlooked. And that's the entry level or low skilled, frontline, blue collar, however you want to kind of name it. It's that market where technology has been skipped past, where people have thought of it not being worth, putting in effort because it's low margins. It's a lot of grunt work and groundwork. But we really believe that if we can figure this out and kind of really speak to a problem in this segment, then you're starting to impact a lot of the gaps that are in not just South African market and not just African market, but everywhere we see in the world. So that's really kind of where what our heart is at JOBJACK is to see the world be employed, and maybe just Cameron, to kind of touch back on a point you mentioned as to entrepreneurs wanting to know where to start. And yes, 100% to get passion, but something I've noticed as well is there's a a hesitance to start something, or there's a wait until someone has a good enough idea or enough funding to actually start with something, where I've noticed that there's so much time in a day if you just segment and prioritize it in the right way. So to give you some context, in the year that I started JOBJACK, I was doing my articles, but I was also studying part-time as well. And I got married that year. And so
Wow.
and not to put, Christiaan can do a lot. Really, I cannot. I'm actually, I think, by nature a pretty lazy person, so I'll try to work smarter and not harder. But if there's clear communication, clear prioritization, then it's easy. Then you wake up early, study, go to work. In your lunchtime, there's a few admin elements that you can maybe work in with regards to your side hustle, and then after work, you can spend an hour or two on your side hustle, and then spend time with your family. And yes, there's some elements you're not going to get to in a specific season. Maybe you're not going to get to as much exercise or maybe as much sleep, which I know is very important in the long run. So it's not something to be ignored or overlooked, for a number of years. But if you're in a season where cool, if I can only put in X amount and that'll get me to a place where I can take the leap of faith, then I think it's an opportunity that a lot more people can jump onto, because really, I've found time should not be an excuse. Yes, money is a big factor, but again, I wanted to remind everyone that time I was an article clerk, and my wife was also in the magazine industry, which was paying even less than the article clerk. So it really wasn't this lavish lifestyle where I could fall back on X, Y, Z. It was an opportunity where we could work hard, when we needed to, but still enjoy life and know that we're working towards a point, and to from that point of traction or a proof of concept, take a further dive.
Yeah, and thank you for sharing that, because what you've reminded me of is a very core principle of mine, is that on the one side, you need the passion and determination, but the other side, you need a lot of patience. And so a huge philosophy of mine is that it takes 15 to 20 years to build a really great business. Intertwine that with my personal belief and philosophy of you kind of got one shot at life. So don't, waste it. And what I mean by wasting it is it's a combination of having fulfillment and meaning and doing something that's impactful. But at the same time, it's also enjoying and experiencing life to its breadth and depth, which includes the depth of connection that you're going to have with your partner and within your family. It's the depth that you're going to have by really committing yourself to doing something meaningful within entrepreneurship. It's the ability to have good sleep and exercise so that you can be as present and productive and healthy in all of those domains as possible. And what you're highlighting is that, and this is why I'll always use that one reference point of 15 to 20 years, because if you consider the marathon being that long, is if I'm working 2 hours a day on this in the early stages, just to test, get customer feedback, figure out what the problem is, learn about this, do that, by the time that you're ready to go to market and you've built it and you just keep up that momentum, the financial opportunity for you to be able to commit all your time to it and then grow is inevitable. And that's just where the patience comes in. And then we can get into the patience around growth stages and scaling like after that. But I really just love that practical share, because I fundamentally agree with that as well. And I think a lot of people struggling to get into entrepreneurship is, I don't have the resources, I don't have the time and the availability to it. I can't handle the risk. And it's like, the risk would just simply be deferring 1 or 2 other hours a day from what you might be doing watching TV to doing this instead. And the only reason why you're not doing that is because you don't care enough about this problem that you're wanting to solve. Probably because you're looking at entrepreneurship as some sexy thing where you just get to work for yourself and make a lot of money. And now you're immediately flawed in terms of your start.
100%. And I think it's sometimes as simple as going, okay, cool. If this is what I want to do, what are the first next practical steps that can be taken, the smallest next practical steps that can be taken, and then to just make peace with a prioritization of what are you going to miss and what are you not going to be able to get to. And I remember at a time I've got this amazing group of friends. We've been working in accountability for the past 12 or 13 years, and I remember 1 week sitting with them. We meet once a week, and I was frustrated with, I'm not getting to X, Y, Z, and I'm trying to be a great husband. I'm trying to be an amazing friend. I'm trying to build this, company. I'm trying to work hard, et cetera, et cetera. And they just reminded me, like, it's okay that you want to do everything, but have peace that you're not going to get to everything in a specific season. And so I think if you can just take a breath and be realistic with what you're just not going to be able to get to at the seasons, then you're going to be operating much more at a place of peace as opposed to discontentment. Because I was feeling like I was dropping balls everywhere. And then it came down to, it's actually pretty easy. My priorities are, one, my faith, but then two, family, and then my work in that season. So friends and exercise just in that season is going to take a back seat. And yes, I'm going to hopefully get there, but it'll be a bonus. And so if I don't get there, I'm not working up this angst of I'm not getting to everything. It's no, I'm getting to the three most important things, and that's enough. And I think if you can operate from that place of peace, and I'm saying peace in quotation marks because easier said than done, but at least it's going to give you some freedom of thought and some freedom of energy as well to focus on the things which are most important.
Thank you, and I love that. I mean, we've just started, just getting into early days, and already these like wise insights and truth bombs are just like off, or like right out the gate. So I'm excited for the rest of this conversation. So now we know the problem that you're focusing on. You're busy chipping away at this. You found your co-founder, right? So how did you get started on this? Because if you're talking about recruitment at an entry-level blue-collar worker perspective, right? Who's your customer?
Asking the real questions. So back in the day when we started, our first customers were event companies. It was the market that kind of sparked the idea, and the market that I want to say knew best because of it being around Stellenbosch. That's where we studied. So a few of our friends were still doing studies, and so you had a bit more of a touch point to the talent market over there, but also obviously to those employers. And so really that was the first point we jumped into, is to just finding more event companies or even restaurants that were wanting students as waiters, as promoters, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that was really the first entry point, and how we approached that was really just to pick up the phone and call a crap ton of events companies per day. It was as easy as that, right? To ask, do they need people? When do they need people? And what are they willing to pay people? And it was obviously less about the pricing back then, even though that's something you constantly think about, but you more want traction in this, and it slowly started morphing then into this massive need that we saw from job seekers. Because to take a step back, as I mentioned, our first approach was to go get the companies, because you'd first want, if you're speaking chicken egg, you'd first want the chicken, you'd first want the jobs, because without the jobs, you're not really going to be able to pull the talent. Because if you're going to pull the talent without opportunities, you're creating hope deferred, right? You're creating an empty space where people build up an anticipation and then there's nothing, then you lose their trust completely. Whereas if you have opportunities, even though you're not going to be able to place everyone, you're at least creating a sense of hope and a sense of, okay, not this time, but maybe next time. And so that really was our approach, is to first go get the jobs, because you could almost more easily justify that once you have a job, it's going to be easy enough to go find willing people to work. And yes, not every market's going to be exactly the same, but in South Africa, you've got an oversupply of talent, and an undersupply of opportunities. And so that's really where we went to go look for first, right, is the scarcity. And so during those kind of beginning months, we got all the more requests and needs from a talent perspective as talent started signing up for more permanent opportunities. But in our head, permanent opportunities that belong to, these big corporates and, kind of high volume employers surely had been figured out in some way, shape or form, right? Like, you're not going to be
One would think, yeah.
hiring out. One would think you're not going to be hiring 100 to 500 people a month and not have a smooth system to do it. But lo and behold, all across the world, there is no system for high volume entry-level employers to find their talent, because you're looking at a legacy system of the past, 100 odd years of a CV being dropped off Now it's maybe a PDF CV being, dumped in a email inbox somewhere. But ultimately, they're just looking at the first 5 or 10 on a pile, hiring the first best person, which is actually not the most relevant person for that opportunity. And so within 3 or 4, 6 months, that person ends up leaving anyway. And so you're creating this cycle of unemployment and lack of growth for a career, which is detrimental to both the employer, the company, because they need to replace people consistently, and for the job seeker, which is just, having to restart every single time. And so by just sheer grace, we got a meeting with Pep stores. And I mean, back then we had 7,000 users, and we sold them the dream. Right? We told them that this is going to be a place where we can be the one-stop shop for all entry-level job seekers to go to, and for the companies to have access to these opportunities, because not one specific company is going to be able to recruit the whole of South Africa, right? So you want to aggregate as much as you can in that, and from that point on, you can start shaping and molding, or let's call it, more practically shortlisting, the talent into the right types of opportunities. And so at that point, obviously, we were quite flabbergasted with regards to what the market is currently doing. And so we, obviously went to go speak to quite a few more clients, and found that, shucks, it really is, there's a gap in the system. And to maybe double down on what the gap really looks like is, currently these entry-level job seekers are spending around 938 Rand a month on looking for work, right? Due to internet costs, creating a CV, printing that CV, taking public transport to drop off that CV. And so most of them, either can't afford it, or they reach 5 or 10 companies, but it might be the 11th one that's a perfect fit. I mean, our research indicates as well that about 6 out of 10 job seekers have to, on a weekly basis, decide between looking for work and feeding their family, right? So,
Sure.
So you really have a massive gap in access to opportunities. And then on the employer side, they're only exposed to those who can actually afford to get to them. Where it might be those outlying players that are actually that best fit, that are going to add long-term value, and that are going to build long-term careers and start changing generational, kind of poverty. And so that's really kind of where our focus then zoned in, is we let go of the gig space, which is still on our radar for one of these days, but really zoned into where the major issue lay in, and that's really kind of where the journey started. Spent the next year, this was 2019, figuring just out, how do we maybe repackage the product, the platform, the pricing. And just when we thought, okay, cool, we have something going, beginning of 2020, lo and behold, COVID hit. Obviously a wonderful time to have started a recruitment company. So that was obviously a bit of a trying time, quite a tough few months, or at least the whole year actually. But from end of 2020, beginning of 2021, things really started taking off. I think we were super blessed with a really robust and dedicated team, and some supportive funders, that we weathered the storm and could see things taking shape and form from there.
Awesome. And I keep the beginning of 2021 in my mind, because you mentioned so many things that I want to get into the depth of, in terms of your lessons, the experience you want to give to candidates, your customers, their problems. Like, there's so much I want to boil down into now. So with what you identified and what you always started was a marketplace solution, right? You mentioned the fact that you need these job boards and job postings in order to attract job seekers. And obviously there's going to be an intertwined scaling with both of those. You need to have a scale of that. One thing that really stood out for me that I found so insightful, thinking about just recruitment, is you mentioned hope deferred. And I never clicked until right now that, a huge part, the reason why recruitment is so daunting is because you've got hope on the one side and despair on the other. And what you mentioned now around the fact that 6 out of 10 people on a weekly basis need to decide if they're going to be feeding their family or seeking a job. That sounds like the world of despair. So and the importance that you bring towards bringing hope to job seekers is actually something that's obviously very philosophical, but so critically important, because there is so much hope when looking for a job, regardless of if you are an executive, or if you're an entry-level worker. So I think the first question that I want to get into now around all of this information is just around the candidate experience, because you've got your customer experience on the B2B side in terms of the likes of PEP core that you're going to be kind of closing, and I do want to focus on that a bit, but let's just focus on the users now and making sure that there's users on the platform, because now we're talking user experience and candidate experience. What were some of the first lessons that you got from them around how to ensure that they would have a good experience on the platform and align with their expectations and desires whilst addressing these very significant problems that you've identified?
So I think, to start off with, our initial idea for this platform, for this app, was a sexy, cool, kind of, I don't know, interactive app that everyone needs to, download on the Apple Store or your App Store, kind of just love the slickness of it, and realized very quickly that one, we needed to build for what the customer wants. And so we still don't have a native app. We still don't have a mobile app. It's a web app that each job seeker that has a phone that can go onto a web browser, which is about 95% penetration in South Africa from that accessibility perspective, they can go onto the platform and they can create a CV, a profile, online profile, and they can apply to jobs. And so our realization, right, from the start was, we're still not going to be able to get everyone an opportunity. But if we can make it as accessible as possible for them to see that there are opportunities, then you're starting to create hope, or at least help create hope. And so I think, one, you need to make peace as to what you can address to your customer and what you can't, and then hopefully double down on what you can. And so very early, a big drive from our side was, one, to make it as easy as possible for these job seekers to access. And I mean, so, Han and myself, my co-founder, we, back in the day used to, put on our tackies and, go into the townships and go hand out flyers, go ask people if they can, sign up or not, go show them how, to really kind of see, one, why aren't people signing up? Or if they do, why aren't they maybe completing their profile? Or why aren't they applying for the job? Because ultimately, you can have an idea of how a user is going to react. But in our case, it's worlds apart as well. And we're not naive to that fact, right? We come from a very privileged and blessed background. And so we need to do extra effort into servicing a market that we are, in all honesty, quite far removed from, and do a lot of effort in trying to connect and trying to really kind of, bridge that gap. And really kind of soon started understanding what is it that they need. So they need to see, one, more well-known brands in their area, right? Because that's going to build that validity and trust from their side, because so many of these job seekers have experienced job scams. So that's something we needed to take into consideration. Oh, shucks, okay. We need to put extra focus on, security or safety of their information, or at least of, the fact that they know this is a real opportunity. So extra messages being sent out, a phone call being made. That's saying, time and time again from Silicon Valley, you need to do things that don't scale in order to scale, right? And so that's something that we had to put a lot of focus into the beginning, and then look at other aspects. So even from a data perspective, right, what is it that we can do to make it more accessible? So our platform is now data free for MTN, Vodacom, and Telkom users, which is the vast majority of that market that we're servicing, and super data light for the rest. And also really easy, step by step to put in prompts to set them up for success. To give you a very practical example, is when completing their profile, most of the options are drop-down options. They need to choose. We're not going to have them spell everything out, because they didn't have the privilege of knowing how to spell everything specifically, right? So you really have to kind of set them up for success. You don't want an employer to see someone's profile or CV and think, oh, shucks, this person can't even spell. But that's not what they're supposed to do in their job. They don't have to spell in their job. They need to read, sure, but that we verify by them actually, setting up a profile. And they need to be able to work hard. And that you can test in, various other ways, as opposed to setting someone up for failure just because they can't spell, the suburb where they live, or whatever their high school. And so those are elements. And I mean, the deeper we dove in the more we could see what are small tweaks that we could do to really speak to what these job seekers need. I know I'm going on a bit of a rant here, but something that like hit us square in the face was at a time we got super frustrated with the lack of no-shows to interviews that were being arranged through the platform. Right, you go into an employer, customer, and you're telling them, if you're going to use the platform, you're going to get more suitable candidates. They're going to pitch for the interviews. You're kind of speaking to all the gaps that used to be there that now are going to be mitigated by using this amazing tool and platform. But still, we found a lower interview success rate or interview pitch rate than we hoped for. And what we realized was the market that we're servicing has been raised and trained and ingrained to survive on a day-to-day basis, right? Like you and I would never be able to survive with the income and the resources they have to survive with. And so for us to expect of them to be thinking, way ahead, or to be thinking, kind of, if I'm not going to pitch for this interview, then I'm not going to get the job, which means I'm not going to be able to, like, it's an unrealistic and unfair expectation from us to get mad at someone that hasn't been, kind of raised in a way that they need to think, way ahead. They need to survive from a day-to-day basis. And that's an amazing skill. And we need to respect that skill. And we need to cultivate and nurture them into understanding, oh, shucks, okay, if I don't pitch for the interview, that means they're not going to be able to actually interview me, which means I'm not going to get the job, which means, I'm not going to be able to feed my family. And so small changes we did was just to say, just a reminder that if you don't pitch for an interview, you will not be able to be considered for the job. I mean, it feels like it's, it shouldn't be have to be said, but our pitch rate increased from 70% to 90%. So like it was a big realization that you really need to go put yourself in the context, the background, the upbringing, and the way of thinking that that your customers are, and react and start speaking to that, because otherwise you're going to frustrate yourself and you're going to build the wrong things.
And this is why I'm so impressed by founders like you and the types of businesses like yours, because the complexity of the number of stakeholders that need to be understood and need to be satisfied in order for this to function, let alone thrive as an ecosystem that you're creating, is so intense. And so what you've described now with the users and the candidates, the job seekers, that's such a critical part to be able to solve and get there. And where a lot of other entrepreneurs in the early stages kind of get it wrong is, I wouldn't say get it wrong. I mean, yes, get it wrong, but they learn the lesson really quickly, is that they think about the users completely. And then they go try to sell this to their customer and can't, because now they've solved all of the users' problems and the candidates' problems, but they have no idea what the problems are for the actual people that are paying for this at the end of the day. So I think it's amazing that you managed to do that, because obviously that's going to be the foundations for the marketplace, the brand that you have, the experience, the mission and vision that you have. Everything that you've got there is around essentially employing the world, with reducing the cost and effort and fear that comes into recruitment. Because I think a lot of what you've said is, and what we tend to take for granted, people coming from privileged backgrounds or people that are highly educated, is that somewhere down the line, we got educated and taught how recruitment processes work. For a lot of people in the world, they haven't been taught that. They don't know what the recruitment processes look like. They don't know why interviews exist. They don't know why CVs are important. They just get into that, and that's why they take a shotgun approach and just apply for anything that they can, because they actually don't know what they're doing. And that's not about knowing what they're doing in the job. They don't know what they're doing in a recruitment process perspective. And that's a whole nother kettle of fish too, that one needs to educate and make it a lot easier to do. But I think thank you for sharing that, because I just really wanted to emphasize how important it is that to consider the user experience and kind of get that right. But now, that doesn't make you money. So let's now talk about the customer side of things. And I want to really go back to Pepcore. Tell me about the journey that you went on in terms of first getting these meetings with these enterprise level corporates, the learnings that you had about their problems, their pain points, and what value they were looking for. and how you managed to get your first enterprise level sale.
Yeah, great shift to what makes it sustainable, right? And maybe just to still hang on to kind of the user, right? So our heart is definitely to see how we can create accessibility and affordability and opportunities. But the best way that we can do that is to go get them more jobs. And to get them more jobs, we need to solve for the employers, the paying employers, problems. And so I think, kind of we've really needed to zone down on not getting stuck in where sometimes your heart, sits with, okay, but how can we even help them more? There are a lot of ways, and there's a lot of, kind of things we still want to do, projects we still want to do, but the very best thing that we can do for them is to go get more opportunities. And yes, there's still elements that you need to speak to, right? Because if you think about the flywheel that Jim Collins refers to in Good to Great, from our side, we need job seekers, because without job seekers, we can't really sell a solvable solution. Even though we're not selling the job seekers or the database, we're selling a system. But the system still needs to be fed by job seekers coming in and having access to those opportunities. But ultimately, that's going to get you more opportunities, and more opportunities are going to get you more job seekers. And so your flywheel kind of starts feeding itself. And I'll speak to the traction that we how the flywheel has been rolling, since or at this point. But to zone down on how we got the first big fish, really, kind of came down to those first meetings, or at least that first meeting with Pep. And in that meeting, kind of, one, you obviously needed to zone on what are the problems that they are needing solved, or what are their inefficiencies, because we had, and I'm not going to mention names, but we had one or two meetings with some other big corporates then as well. Went in bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, full of confidence and cockiness, and said, "Yeah, we're building this system that's going to employ the world, and what we're doing is the best." And they just nailed us with just practical questions. Okay, cool. Well, if we're experiencing this, what are you guys doing to solve this? If we're experiencing this, what are you doing to solve this? And within 20 minutes, we'd set out an hour for the meeting. 20 minutes, we were out of the office, and tail between our legs. But it's beautiful. Those clients are now clients of ours. After a few years of learnings,
and you learn more from that than you do from most other meetings.
100%. Learn more from that than you do, I think, with some business degrees out there. But what it came down to is really zoning down on what are their obviously problems, and what is your solution going to be, and why is your solution going to be the best solution for their problems, right? Because they can solve their problems in a specific way. I remember a lot of the conversations back then, and we still encounter the conversations. Cool, well, why can't we build it ourselves, right? If it's a big corporation, why can't we just, we have a lot of money, we have even developers, why can't, and fair, you can try, and some have tried, but some have came back to us after a year or two, because, to my point that I made earlier, if you're building a marketplace and you're building an aggregation of a flywheel, you as a single entity cannot, for the life of you, employ everyone. And so you're creating a dispersity of where people need to go to. And in that, you're creating kind of a broken chain and a broken flow, or broken flywheel, where it's going to feed itself. So what made it really beautiful, and I think this is probably just, again, by grace that we could sell it in this way, is we could really sell the mutual benefit that each company that signs up would give to one another. Because each McDonald's, KFC, Pep, Woolworths, etc., that signs up creates more opportunities, creates more job seekers, and creates more impact and input for each company that signs on. So that became a real kind of double-edged, kind of sword that we could go into meetings with from a impact perspective, because we're really here to see more people get opportunities, but also from a commercial benefit for a company, or a value add for a company to come in. And so kind of those beginning conversations really hung to those dreams or ideals, as opposed to now where we could prove more traction and prove more use case. And then it zoned down to, cool, let's trial this. And there are obviously, different opinions for, trial or pilot based versus, kind of just straight rollout. And you as a SaaS business or any business need to, according to our understanding and approach, revisit your pricing every quarter. You need to really look at, are you, one, adding the value you should be, and two, is your pricing most conducive to growth, to scale, or to, kind of the value prop that you're giving out there. And so, but in the beginning, you're still figuring that out. So we really had a lot of craze for ourselves into saying, cool, we would always want clients to pay, even if it is for a trial, because it has some skin in the game. And so that's advice I'll give to anyone taking on, especially enterprise or B2B, is to have them pay, even if it's for a small trial. But then from those learnings to scale what works, not what you think is going to work, and then you drop the ball, 100 or 200 stores in. So that was really our approach back then. And obviously, with each new client, you leverage off the reputation of that client. So whether it be to ask that client for referrals, and I'll be honest, that's not something we did back then, and probably still don't do enough. But what we've learned is ask and ye shall receive. It's really, if you get to even the first or second point of contact after a successful go ahead, people are excited enough to say, okay, cool, well, yes, I'll intro you to this person. You just have to be specific in your ask to who you want them to intro you. You don't have to wait for 6 or 12 months into the journey before you feel comfortable enough in asking them for something. I know it seems daunting and seems a little backwards because you first want them to prove. Yes, you might get 1 out of 10 people that would say, no, I'd rather first just test this thing out. And that's fine. But more cases than not, we've seen now, people are eager enough to just make an introduction call or send an introduction email. So that's something that I wish we would have done more. But what we still did was to leverage off the reputation of our current clients in the industry that we're in, right? So that it started out purely coincidentally in retail space, due to our meeting that we got with Pep, and then kind of that flowed over into more retail connections, and coincidentally, retail is also more well known or publicly seen. And so the brands that you could leverage and showcase to the public gave us a lot of validity because people know retail brands, as opposed to, let's call it manufacturing or security or so forth, call center. And so I think it was a double whammy from a growth perspective. As one, you have brand, public brands that you can, kind of jump off on. But you also, and this is something we realized pretty quickly, to focus on a specific industry is key. At a time, we tried a bit of a spray and pray approach, and it's just, especially in B2B, the smaller you niche, the better you become at that niche, the better reputation you have of quality, the more you can kind of leverage off that quality to the next industry. And so that's really something we've zoned in on, is to take it industry by industry. And as you become more confident with one industry, you can start testing out another one. But the advice we got, and that we sometimes ignored, but also just luckily I think stuck to, was to see that there are nuances to change management, to adoption, to value add, to reputational kind of belief, is stick in the industry and become the champion in that industry or in your niche. And from there, kind of you can start expanding.
Yeah, I mean, and to the point is, it becomes so obvious to me in like hindsight, but product market fit is unachievable without a focus and boundary around what market you're going to get a fit in the first place, right? It's not around like 100%. Where does the product stick and then spaghetti at the wall and then go from there. It's like you got to have significant product market boundaries, because also if you don't, right, you're going to have this moment of success and traction and momentum, and without the focus on the market boundaries, you're going to be thinking product centric. And you're going to place it in different places, and you're going to have all these features and different strategies that are going to work, and you're going to kind of hit this level of complexity and ceiling of your growth because you're not able to leverage off of previous sales to get further sales. Mention like the whether it's referrals, the logos you have on the website. So yeah, I think I'm a huge advocate for focus and boundaries and where you're going to concentrate.
100%. I just want to say, like, it's so true, because you can't say you have product market fit if you don't know what your market is. and each market's going to be different, right? So, I mean, even on our side, we have product market fit for some markets. We don't have product market fit for other markets. And I think like for someone to arrive and say, we've got product market fit, we probably haven't segmented what your markets are. We've just kind of, seen that in some of the startup spaces that we've been in. And I'm speaking generally now, there are companies that can literally say they've gotten product market fit because they've really run the race, or they've got a product that's wide enough to cover any market or whatever the case may be. But that's something I think that also keeps you on your toes, to not have overconfidence in that you've sold it for everyone, because as you mentioned, right now your focus on figuring it out market by market is what's going to get you that buy-in, what's going to get you that we try and refer to it as a cult-like following. At JOBJACK, we're trying to make JOBJACK the best part of someone's career, best part of someone's work. Awesome. In the HR space, right? If they're in recruitment, like JOBJACK needs to be the best part of their day. And so if you're not going to speak to their nuanced needs in the industry, then you're not going to get that right. But if you get that right, then you're going to get a feed funnel of people that are proclaiming your service without you even asking.
And now that opens up a whole different element to actually what I wanted to go back to now, is like you've kind of solved for good enough on the job seeker experience, right? In terms of being able to build the solution and processes for them to be able to ensure that you're getting, good interview pitch rates, you're getting good quality candidates, you're getting them actually active on the profile. Now, talking to these customers and the nature of what it is that you do, what I want to know is, who's the buyer versus who's the user on the customer side? Because you mentioned now HR, you mentioned recruitment's using this. I'm pretty sure finance is going to be involved. There's going to be procurement. There's HR as well. Operations has got to be onboarded into this too. I mean, it's very complex solution as a software to implement, because on the candidate side and the job seeker side, it's cool. It's like you solve that as like there's one user portal and everyone is able to put in and create their profile and submit their applications. But now on the customer side, right, there's obviously this whole complexity of these users. So what I want to know is, who are the different stakeholders on the corporate side that you really had to learn about and build for, and which of those is the actual buyer?
Great question. Yeah, so I think again that also starts coming down to your niche focus, right, from an ICP perspective, right, your ideal customer profile, in knowing what industry, because each industry is going to maybe have a different structure, and two, what size of business, because each size of business is also going to have a different structure. And if you're not focusing, then you're trying to speak to all types of structures, and then you're probably going to be less effective in onboarding them or selling to them. And so on our side, generally, because we focus on slightly bigger organizations, you have a head of HR or HR director that sits with the ownership usually of this problem. But then you probably have a HR manager that is more, dealing with this on a day-to-day or week-to-week basis. But then you have your regional or branch managers that are actually needing to do the recruitment and interview the people and so forth. And then also you might have your CFO that's going to sign off on this, right? Because historically there's never been bug. And less IT, luckily. At the moment, we've built our system so that it's that no integrations are needed. But yes, we are heading to that space. So thanks for reminding me of that complexity, Cam. But ultimately, you then have people that need to sign off on this budget as well, because there's never been budget for something like this, right? It's always been a free box of paper CVs. And so you need to start seeing and speaking to how does that touch each of those players' problems collectively, and how do you onboard them collectively, and how do you speak to their usage and commitment, collectively, but also individually. Because if the decision maker's going to say, yes, let's go, but the end user's not using it, you have a mismatch and they're not going to continue using it. Or other way around as well, right? If your end user loves it, but your decision maker thinks it's a waste of money, it's going to go nowhere. And so we have by no means chosen the most simplistic way of building a service or solution. But I mean, again, our hearts aren't in it for for a quick buck. It's really to see the most impact being made. And the more we delve into this, the more we're seeing that it's really adding a lot of value. Yes, to the job seeker, but also to these to these amazing people that are recruiting people, that are employing people, to these companies that are creating livelihoods. Right? We're seeing that we get into a specific business, and sometimes they think they have it sorted. Sometimes they know they've got a problem, but they, at this point and historically, can't even touch on what the problem really is. And what we've really seen, and what makes me super excited is that we've started really delving into putting ourselves into their shoes, into them thinking they want someone that just has matric and that stays in a 5-kilometer radius, and it's a good starting point, sure. But what we notice is that there's then still a disconnect, and there's still a gap in if someone's really relevant for a specific role. And so what we even did, started doing a few years ago, was to look at, okay, well, what then really speaks to a solution that drives, one, the relevance from a getting the right person on board, but also then having the right job seeker add value in the long term, which really speaks to that, that the bottom line, or the long-term value add for that decision maker as well. And that was to see, how do we up the quality, or let's rather refer to it, how do we ensure that there's a better relevant fit for a specific job seeker for a specific role. And so it came down to really looking into to some psychometric assessments, but couldn't really find a viable solution, catered for this market, because most of these psychometric,
and an affordable one, because psychometrics also very expensive.
No, it's ridiculous. It's built in the States or in Europe, and it's anything between 2 to 5 K per assessment, which is just candidate, it's impossible to run that at that level. And so we said, well, okay, well, if that's the norm, we are here to change the norm. So yeah, we built up our own team of industrial psychologists, some of the smartest people that I've ever met, and they have built amazing psychometric assessments focused on this market to really start speaking, one, to the job seeker, that they can actually have accessibility and an understanding of how to complete these assessments, but then also that starts speaking to the customers, to the clients, that really give them value into, wow, they're getting the right talent that's not just going to make their lives easier, on a day-to-day, but that's really going to build the business, which will hopefully in turn create more opportunities, and continue feeding the gap that's out there. So that's been some of the realizations we've had is that our customers don't even always know what their problem is, and so you really need to put on and I'm reluctant to say it, but a consultative hat in sitting with them in a sales seat, because it doesn't help you just force a solution on them. It might really not be the solution that they're after. But what we found more times than not, if you really put yourself in their seat and want to make your solution the best part of their day, you're going to get to something that's workable and that's replicable and scalable for most of the users in that similar market and niche.
So what I want to know now is, like, speaking to all these different users, understanding their problems, taking this consultative approach, right? What did you start finding worked in the different persona value propositions, if I can put it that way? Because, whether it's time to hire or quality of hire or, volume of CVs that I need to wade through, and if we're looking at cost of hiring, if we're looking at employee retention, if we're there's so many different things that matter to so many different stakeholders, and there's going to be these demands that are just very complex to be able to solve, right? So what I want to know is just briefly, because I really do want to get into a lot more of the post 2021 journey, but the traction that you got from a sales perspective, when you started realizing that these value propositions stick, these answers work, and our conversion rate and our sales time is starting to decrease. What are those things that you developed, and how you went about getting those lessons to know that these are the hooks, these are the value propositions, and now we're starting to see the ball rolling?
Yeah, great question. And I don't think it's something that I'll ever be able to say we've figured it out, because we're constantly finding more value props that speak to more personas or the different personas. But that being said, I think something that we came to a quick realization on was that in our head, and when just speaking very surface level, we thought the value prop was cool, getting candidates quicker or getting them access to more candidates. Right, currently we have about 3 million registered job seekers and about 5,000 sign up every day.
That's amazing. Well done.
It's great from a traction perspective. It's super sad from a need perspective in the market, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, thanks. So I don't want to be a Debbie Downer in your congratulations. It's cool to see that the brand is out there, 100%. But that doesn't, quite frankly, mean anything from a value perspective to the clients. It's a good hook, and so we've realized there's a difference between a hook and between a converter of a actual demo that you're doing, right, to get them to actually sell. So the 3 million job seekers is a good hook. The proof that other companies around them is a good hook because it creates FOMO. I remember, first year or two, 3 out of every 4 companies don't want to meet with you. No, that would be generous. 9 out of every 10 companies don't want to meet with you. And then as soon as you can start proving, oh, well, this person came on, it creates a lot of FOMO. And then you kind of cool those. So the hooks become more, so the meetings become more, which is amazing.
That also makes your very authentic posting on social media around we're just working with them, we're working with them is, although it's very authentic because you're excited about it. I understand completely the strategy behind why you're doing that is because you're enhancing that FOMO. Is like, hey, if you said no to this meeting, they're on board.
100%. So a quick shameless selfie that you just need to put your pride in your pocket for a bit walking through the mall goes a long way. You are 100% right. But then getting into the meeting, you need to speak to, okay, cool. Yes, what is going to speak to end user store manager X, HR, recruiter Y, and decision maker, Z. And in one pitch, you're going to need to speak to all 3 of their problems. And luckily, we kind of came to a realization that what makes all of their lives easier and what makes signing a check, or at least a check to try something out, much easier is if you can prove one or educate one them what their current problem is. So something we kind of really noticed very soon was that there was a uneducated market out there, right? Think of it as they've been using wood for the past 100 years to make fire. We are not selling them a different type of wood. We are now selling them charcoal, right? It's something completely different. And okay, charcoal is definitely not better than wood, but obviously what we're doing is much better than wood.
I get the metaphor. Let's not
let's not upset the Bri Nation. But what we were able and have been able to do all the more is to point out where the inefficiencies are and where their major cost centers are. Because if you can point out the inefficiencies, then you're speaking to the user of it, right? The day-to-day player. And if you can point out the costs involved in those inefficiencies, then you can really speak to the decision maker. Then it makes it a no-brainer to sign off a check. And so what really kind of started making those nays into yays was if we could prove just a slight downtick in some of those inefficiencies and thus costs. And what made it beautiful is the more use cases you have to show, listen, this customer went from 100% staff turnover in a year to 17% staff turnover in a year. Yes, that's a big kind of a big jump, but you could confidently prove it. And you'd say, well, if we only get you to decrease that with 3%, then we're saving you X, and that's a fraction of what you're going to pay us. And so those are the elements that really started, I think, getting things over the line. One from a yes perspective, but also 2 from a pricing perspective, right? Because in the beginning, you're very unconfident in your approach because it's something new, it's something that they don't understand, it's something that they don't have budget for, and it's something that you don't necessarily have a lot of traction in doing. But the more you're able to prove your value, and I think time and time again, it really does come down to the bottom line for most of enterprises. So if you can prove with a conservative kind of return for them how it's going to touch their bottom line, then it's usually a very easy decision for them to go back to, CFO or whoever that's going to sign it off and say, well, it's a no-brainer.
Yeah, because B2B sales are very complex because there's so much consensus decision making, so many different people and humans that you need to speak to that are worried about their jobs at the end of the day. And if you need to get them all involved in how it's going to improve it, but also, even though it's complex, B2B sales is very uncomplicated. How is this going to improve revenue or improve efficiencies? And at the end of the day, either of those things are going to improve profit. If you can just explain simply that logic, cool. But as long as you can explain to the human beings involved, practically and emotionally, how it's going to make their jobs better, and then simplify that and summarize it in terms of this is how revenue is going to go up, this is how efficiencies are going to be improved, and therefore costs are going to go down and profit's going to be better. Thank you. That's all I need to hear. When do we start? Obviously, it's not that simple,
100%. But it really can be. And I think what we've noticed as well, because obviously, in the world we live in now with technology and, AI as a buzzword, like people are sometimes, most of the times, threatened with a technology solution, right? And so what we've needed to kind of just add to our narration of it and in a very true and authentic way is how this is going to make them the champion. This is how is it going to,
especially in HR.
Especially in HR, how's it going to shine a spotlight on them? Because it's not going to replace what they're doing. It's going to make them seem like, one, it's going to just make their lives much easier and just be the best part of the day. But two, it's also going to prove to their line manager or the person above them that, wow, they are like rocking it. They're getting the right people at the right time, and they're saving money as well. And so they're growing my business for me, right? We have a saying at JOBJACK that we believe internally, but we also use for all our clients is you don't build the business, you build the people, and the people build the business. And if you can really prove to each individual that you're speaking to how this is going to make them the star in their company, then you're speaking to their emotion, but also you're giving them ammunition to go implement this and to run with this and to own this.
100%. And also at the end of the day with HR is that, if you're helping them provide a better service to their customers, which is ops at the end of the day, then they're gonna have more respect. They're gonna have the seat at the table that they're looking for all the time. They're gonna add more value. They're gonna feel more important in their jobs. And it's those things that you speak to, which is it's so fascinating at the point there is because that's not how you hook them. That's not how you even acquire them as a customer, but that's how you retain them. And that's how you get your advocates. And that's how they will never go anywhere else, because it's about the fact that it's like, you've been able to not just make my life easier, you've made my life better because of this. And 100%. I think that's fantastic. Let's pause here for a moment. If you've made it this far into the episode, it's probably because we're talking about things that you're trying to implement in your business. You found your sweet spot in the market, you've gained momentum, and you've already been through a phase of growth. Because of this, you know that on the outside, growth is super sexy, but on the inside, it's incredibly difficult to achieve and to sustain. So now I've got a question for you. Now that you know the sacrifices it takes to achieve growth, how much time are you currently spending thinking about your direction and your next phase of growth? I bet not as much as you'd like, because you're still in the thick of it. Leading, deciding, pushing for performance, pursuing new opportunities, maybe even thinking about selling the business. See, your story is yours. But this chapter where growth meets complexity, this is when things get hard. Because you can listen to insights from podcasts and stories from people that have been there before, but applying it to your context is a completely different ballgame. So let me help you. If you want to have a 90-minute, no strings attached conversation with me, then head over to Metavolve's website in the description of this podcast below, and let me help you navigate this next phase of growth. Because at the end of the day, building a great business is complex, but it doesn't have to be complicated. Christiaan, I want to completely change gears now, because I think what we've really gotten into is the source of your traction, kind of a lot of the detail in terms of that's the emphasis around your product market fit, which obviously I want to ask a specific question around. But I think the first thing now that we haven't really spoken about is your investors, right? So talk to me just about those first investment rounds. When did you raise investment? From who? Why them? And what did they bring to the table?
So if you're speaking about investments, there is an array of opinions on that. Our approach and this was our approach, was with the thinking that what we are taking on will only work at scale, and to reach that scale, we are going to need capital input. There are ways of pseudo funding, there are ways of bootstrapping, but if we wanted to get where we felt we wanted to get at a certain time, we wanted to get external investment. And so we actually took on quite the stereotypical fools, friends, and family round. So we had someone come in after we had quite a nice traction. That was kind of the traction we got during the articles, proved enough value to really go get a family member that was not necessarily a fool, to confidently, invest in what we were doing with, with a respectable stake. And that kind of, got things going. With that, we actually outsourced our MVP, and rebuilt it 2-3 months later, because what they say, if you're not embarrassed about your MVP, you launch too late, right? We were very much embarrassed of our MVP, but it's something that we got out of the market and that we could test with. And with that MVP, we were able to get some more traction and raise our first angel round. And so I think back then we used some platform, I think investmentnetwork.co.za, uploaded our kind of profile or pitch on there, and then you get connected to various individuals. So we, I think in the first 6 months after kind of launching our MVP, we had various angels come in and just give us bit by bit, and we were pretty specific, and I think also lucky kind of in just the way we did it was by not raising too much too soon, because we didn't have to give away too much too soon. And each time we then, kind of did another raise, we could do it at a higher valuation. And I think that kind of really, one, forced us to count our, rands and cents, but two, to also kind of zone down and make the most of, what we have at that point. And yes, funding takes a bit of time, but at that stage, it didn't really take a lot of time, because again, you leverage your networks. You have one angel that has given yes, and well, since, they've invested, look at what you've done, do they know someone else? Or you have someone, coming from some channels that you are, or whatever the case may be. And so those few angel rounds really got us to a point where we could really, I think, confidently say we've got a proof of concept. I think back then we were confident enough to say we've got product market fit, but hindsight is always the best side. Luckily, my co-founder's name is Hein as well, so we always have hindsight. And so we were then able to, I think year 2, which is 2019, go to our first institutional investors and raise a seed round. And that time, by that time, we'd had angels that were less involved, but willing to help where we needed it. And I don't have a strong opinion on, in the angel side of things. I've seen founders get angels that are too involved and steered in the wrong direction. And I've seen people with angels that are not involved at all, and they don't mean much except for the cash. And I'd say we did have some of the latter ones, but that was fine with us. We had enough, or 1 or 2 angels that were willing to help when we wanted to, but at a very healthy arm length. And so that kind of got us to a point where we could then say, okay, cool. Well, we want investors now from an institutional perspective that are really going to climb in, kind of from a long-term thinking perspective with us. So each round that we've always done, even the last one, we really went to go seek patient investors that weren't necessarily out for a quick 3-5 year exit, because otherwise it forces you to build with a short-term thinking, as opposed to, as you mentioned, Cameron, yourself, your 15-20 year thinking. Because ultimately,
play really long-term games with long-term people.
There we go. Right, like 100%. And so that's been super valuable in, one, not wasting your time with people that are not in that space. And there's nothing wrong with people that are in that space. That's just not how we were building, or why we're building what we're building. And so that, one, makes those conversations much easier. But then to look at those first institutional investors, and a big part of what we wanted on board at that time was value-aligned investors, because we knew this was something that we were doing from an impact first perspective, but also a long-term thinking and big build perspective. We wanted, people on the table that really understood where our hearts were coming from, but that would also keep us accountable in, how we're going to get there. And so that was a massive blessing, just in the sense that it came on just before COVID. So we, could to a degree weather out the storm, and it was very much touch and go. Salaries were cut, and too-minute noodles were eaten, but nonetheless, it was a very rewarding, kind of blizzard to go through, because we had these investors that would ask you how your family is doing before they would ask you how the bottom line is doing, which I think is, not necessarily going to motivate everyone in every season, but during the toughest of times, which COVID was, it was really invaluable. So I think that was really just a blessing, and then even thereafter, kind of we could see the traction coming from post-COVID side, and so by then we had the ability to then go raise a few more angels as a kind of a post-seed extension, just to continue with the traction that we saw then, which then ultimately got us to end of last year, where we did our pre-series A round, again with players that were in it for the long run and were impact focused, but that really, could add value from a growth perspective, from a, what is it going to take for us to be the go-to global platform for entry-level jobs. And so the journey so far has been amazing with each of our investors. We really have had amazing relationships with each of our investors up until this stage, and obviously hoping for that, in the future as well. But I think a base of that was getting value aligned investors on board, and not wasting time or not disregarding, people that are in it for a different reason, but just being more, intentional about who you're going to have those conversations with. Otherwise, the saying of, it's going to steal 6 to 9 months of your life can become true. In our case, it really wasn't. In our case, it was 2 weeks of wonderful conversations, and then a few more months of DD that we could hand over to our CFO.
Yeah, awesome. Who are your competitors? Like, what is your? Because I compare it to us. Like with Metavolve, it's not around like coaches or accelerators. It's our biggest competition is founders wanting to do it themselves, right? And so, in terms of like developing their own strategy. So, what's your biggest competition?
I think you touched on it beautifully in your realization at Metavolve. So at JOBJACK, our biggest competition are paper CVs, paper and PDF CVs, and the norm of that, the legacy of that over the past 50 or 100 years. It really is the mindset of the companies at the moment. That's our biggest competition.
Yeah. So with that insight around the paper CVs, I think back to your traction with your market and your customers, and you point out about the fact that you're helping them identify their problem. But the biggest thing with a lot of people is what their problem is something that they just simply take for granted as this is just the norm and this is reality and this is how life works. And when you come to them as like, it doesn't have to be that way, it can be this way, that's when they open their eyes to realize, oh my gosh, I realize now how much time is being wasted. And I think was that maybe the moment and like the realization that caused the ball to roll towards your traction?
100%. There's a sales methodology that speaks to, one, obviously diving into their problems, right, to discover their problems, and then to educate them about what is it that they're missing out, or where are the inefficiencies lying, and to get them to oh my word, this is like, yes, you actually right, this is ridiculous. Like, to get them to realize that what they're currently doing is just absolutely wasteful of their time and, kind of society as a whole. And then to obviously associate what you do to their problem. And so our kind of sales demos and conversations, let's use an hour as an example. The first 40 to 45 minutes, JOBJACK hasn't been mentioned once, right? Because you're really just diving into their problems and educating them into like the efficiencies and what's being done in the market, and et cetera, et cetera. And then only by the end, you're like, okay, oh shucks, we've actually seen this as well. And so, this is what's been built to solve exactly what you said. So most of the time, it's not us also learning. Most of the time, we have quite a good idea of where the inefficiencies lie. But we're just asking the questions to get them to realize it themselves. Because ultimately, you want them to, if you're going to ask them 45 minutes in, so is this actually something you want to solve, and how urgently? You want them to say, oh my word, I want to solve this yesterday. Like, I don't care how much it costs, like this needs to be solved. And easier said than done. I'm making as if it's, that case every time, but that's where you want to push them towards. And the closer you can get to that, the higher your yes rate is. So yeah, sorry, I can't even remember your question anymore, but yes,
no,
education.
Just for the sake of our audience, what is that sales methodology you just referred to, so they can go research it themselves and drop in the comments their own lessons?
So what I'm referring to is the DEAL methodology, DEAL, which is discover, educate, associate, and lead the conversation to where you want it to go. It's a course that you can go research DEAL masterclass. They obviously going to thank me for giving that through, but it's based on a book called The Challenger Sale, and the Challenger Sale really speaks to you as selling company, challenging them to think in a way that's going to lead to them realizing that they have a problem and you're the solution to that problem. It kind of speaks to that consultative approach thing. And the Challenger Sale is a book that is much more accessible than taking on the course that it was very valuable. So I'd advise anyone to try it out. But a book is a book, so you can always buy a book.
Yeah. So thank you for sharing. The relevance to that now is because now I want to get into the whole point around product market fit and linking it to your pre-series A. But I think everything we've spoken about now, we've gone to so much depth, this is why product market fit is difficult to achieve. You need the right market positioning. You need to understand the value proposition. You need to understand who your competition is. And then that's not always a direct rival. It's often your customers themselves and their own beliefs. It's understanding the customer experience, the user experience that needs to be delivered. It's all the experience and sales training from you as the founder and what you've done. And that's the implicit thing that we haven't spoken about. You haven't had a sales team, right? You've been driving the sales yourself. And you're the one having these conversations. You're at the coalface understanding what these problems are. And there's so much that goes into getting that point of product market fit. And everything we've spoken about now is the route towards that. You achieve that within the retail space, quite from a validated perspective. As an outsider, look, I mean, obviously you're the person to decide. Actually, no, you're not the person to decide. The market's who's going to decide whether you've got fit or not. But from an outsider's perspective, it looks pretty certain that you've got a fit in at least the retail space, maybe the fast food space as well. You can tell me about that. But now, and the reason why I bring this up and related to pre-Series A is that at least in mature VC markets, Series A is usually the raise that you make when you have product market fit, because now you're going to be scaling or expanding your operation into new markets, whether that's new geographies or related or unrelated markets in your same geography. And for you, you've got both growth strategies available to you. You can go with your multinational clients into the geographies that they're currently sitting in, or you can stay within South Africa and go into different industries and different markets accordingly. And that, I'm just going to plant that seed there, because that I can't wait to get into as well. But just speaking specifically to the retail sector and maybe the fast food sector, one, how did you validate that you had product market fit in the first place? And then two, why pre-Series A and not Series A itself?
Okay. So to your first question, I think to validate, if we had product market fit, and yes, just to clarify, we do feel our niche at the moment is that we can confidently, kind of service is your retail and your fast food space. Just because we came to a point where we could see, and I think this kind of then answers the how do we know we have product market fit, is if we have clients that are non-touch clients. So we obviously selling an enterprise solution, which generally requires quite a bit of hands-on servicing as well, right? From a account service perspective, account management perspective. But we have a relative large number of clients that actually service themselves completely. we don't need to touch them. Yes, we check in with them, but we can see that they're doing it really well. And I think when we got to that point, we were like, whoa, okay, this is cool. Like they are using it and they're using it without us. And I think that then you come to a point where, because we thought we had product, fit in that space, but before we got to there, you don't, because ultimately you're only going to have a fit if the person's like, okay, cool, thanks, I'll take it from here. And we still don't have that with, all of our clients, even the majority of our clients. But, that's a good indicator that, great, okay, if we can get everyone, we now have a model that we know fits well. And if we can get the existing part of that market or that industry onto that, boom, then we can start taking on the next industry. And same from a market perspective. And so to kind of scrape on your comment on the market versus industry expansion, yes, it's a debatable one, kind of that we considering and arguing and wrestling with internally and kind of so both are in the pipeline. I think there's arguments to be made for both going deep and going wide, and our chase and ambition is to do both. So we're venturing through that. But that being said, not too deep. Deep to a point where we know we have enough stickiness that we can, kind of ride the wave then across industries and across geographical markets. And then two, probably on that point then as well, why pre-Series A versus Series A? All honesty, if you guys speak to the vast majority of VCs at the moment, naming schmaming, pre-Series A, Series A, like it's really just like a term used in whichever way, shape or form you kind of want it to be used. That being said, there was a method to the madness. Because for some VCs, we were post-Series A, for some we were seed. All right, and so to kind of like get to what works for everyone, our thinking was, yes, generally there's this thinking that if you've hit some type of product market fit and you're ready to expand, you're at around Series A. We, however, knew that we still wanted to zone down on a bit of our stickiness in our current industries and South African market. And then from there to start, kind of really expanding into some other geographical markets. And we knew, with that leaves a space for, possible further rounds. And the later you get in rounds, the more expectation there is of traction and the lower your valuation, let's say room for negotiation is. If you think of pre-seed, seed, there's a lot of room for negotiation and kind of, elements to be considered and can be stretched within that. And so if we labeled this one as Series A, what would the next one need to be? Post-Series A or even Series B. Whereas because we have a pre-Series A now, that would make our next one a Series A. And that just gives you a little bit more room for movement, for freedom, for a non-fixed expectation of where you need to be and where you need to go thereafter. So just left a bit of room. I think maybe that's our accountants in us, the conservativeness in us that just comes from a planning for the future perspective. But that was our thinking in the naming convention of the round.
Well, it's also a very clever way to protect your own equity, because not only does it open up later rounds, but the point there is about the valuation you're able to, if you had to go, I'm a seed stage, but the valuation of the company is here, the amount of equity you're going to be able to give away for the same investment in monetary terms is way different than if you're we're at Series A and this valuation's here. And it's like, okay, well, we're going to want a bit more equity to almost take on that risk because we expect higher numbers at this stage. So doing that is not just around managing expectations, you're protecting your own ownership for later stages when you're going to have to keep, broadening out your cap table and giving away more of more founder equity. So I think it's something that, when you say method in the madness, I think it's just a very clever strategy that you employed in terms of being able to manage your investors, and specifically in the very immature VC market that we have here, where a lot of founders don't actually understand this, and specifically, like, they're just looking at their next round. They're not like this. The whole strategy is actually just raising my seed round, and they're not thinking about, well, what happens when you get to Series B and you've got 12% equity left in your company? Are you still going to want to even be around then?
So true, and I think, look, so there are also arguments for both, right? And I think our our approach in that was not to be greedy with, not giving away too much, because again, 1% of $1 billion is, much more than 100% of 10 Rand, right? But that being said, yes, you need to think ahead, not from a greedy perspective, but from a sustainability and a motivation perspective.
Exactly.
And so 100%. And I think what could have nudged it as well is, we raised in a year that saw some of the worst, kind of downward spiral in, startup valuations and, kind of VC interaction with startups. So our timing is always just wonderful.
It actually is. If you look at the use cases of the company that raised money during winters, and it's a pretty good sign of where you're headed.
But so I think, yes, I think it's again, we just, I think, kind of blessed with some good counsel and kind of thinking of it, hopefully not in a greedy way, but more in a sustainable way. Again, we're in it for the long run. And I think, and again, there are different approaches, and you touched on it so beautifully in the beginning, Cam, if you think about it as a 15 or 20-year journey, you're going to make much more, sustainable choices, as opposed to thinking of, I need to exit within 5 to 7 years or even less. You're going to build it in a different way. It might be fine. It might be what you want to do. And that's 100%. It's just not what the route that we're choosing to do.
And just the point there is like exits are everything, specifically in the VC world. That's critical. That's how they make money. But just because they're exiting doesn't mean you do, right? So the point is like create the business in a way that allows them to be able to exit and make the business exitable for any shareholder, but stay, right? And help them exit so they can get their returns.
100%. Make it honorable for them as well, right? Like you as founder having, a sustainable stake or road to a sustainable stake is beneficial for them as well, because it means you're super motivated and you're going to keep being motivated and build this company that's going to, kind of benefit their pocket in the long run, short and long run. Yeah.
So Christiaan, now we are, sitting in May right now. We're recording this podcast, right? You made this raise in, the end of 2023, in October, right? Besides that, after that, also won Startup of the Year with the Startup Club, right? This raise itself was $2.5 million, 45 million Rand, quite a very significant raise, but also not a lot of money if you've already budgeted for it, because you've got to be, because like at face value, it's like, wow, lots of cash. It's not. And from a business terms perspective, in terms of being smart with it, as you know, as an accountant. So I just want to know, what have you done in the 7 months, right? Since, if my maths is correct, looking back to October. So how have you deployed that capital? How have you grown since then? And how has that raise affected where you've allocated your resources in the past half a year? And what has the impact of that been so far?
So I think with COVID, with our accounting background, and with most startups, high growth startups, unfortunately becoming stats of, oops, we spent too much, now we can't raise, let's retrench or close our doors. We very intentionally have, kind of given ourselves enough runway. I think that there's a fine balance in runway management versus aggressive growth, and you shouldn't be neglecting either of them, right? We did the raise to grow. That being said, we don't want to rush into any choices, but our main deployment of this cash, and that could only have been actioned once we got the raise, because you can never count your chickens until they hatch, was to hire some experience. And so those positions were only, kind of made live, and obviously, kind of to get the right people takes quite a few months to really kind of get us to the next way of thinking, next level of expertise that we need. We have an amazing team with amazing potential, but even I know, I'm definitely not the best salesperson. I did it for the first 5 years maybe, but that's definitely not going to get us to where we need to go even in the next year. And so for everyone, each member of the team, whether they a leader in the team, or a kind of person that has a very specific set of skills, they need to know that if we want to get to where we need to get, we need people that have hopefully run some way, shape, or form of the race previously. And so a lot of that capital has really gone into planning for that as well. Obviously, there's some structural, changes that need to be made. Right, we 50 people now. I think before raise, or let's call it a year ago, I think we were only 24 people. So so you're doubling in teams. So your office space, your infrastructure. Obviously, if you have 5,000 people signing up a day, 3 million, kind of users, most of them doing psychometric assessments, applying, going through questions, and you have your, cloud infrastructure, your database. All those elements start, building up as you grow, and things that you never thought of. And now you're like, oh, well, a year ago, I would never have thought about paying X, 1,000 Rand to database, X, Y, Z. And now it's just oh, well, this needs to happen. And so I think we have a kick-ass CFO. She is amazing. And so, to build enough buffer for the unforeseen, but to also know what's needed to be switched on, even though it's sometimes a bitter pill to swallow, to get us to where we need to go in the next year, two, but then also in the next, 5 to 10 years. So that's really where and that was the message to the investors as well. It's not this round was not necessarily aggressive geographic market expansion. This round was really to cement the stickiness of what we know we need in order to jump, in order to fly. So yes, it might involve some dipping of the toes in the water in some markets or so forth, but it really kind of is just to cement the foundation that we can launch off of in the coming season.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, and just practically, like you've hired a head of sales, a head of marketing. I know that you were hiring for them. I don't know if you've appointed both of them.
We have.
Yeah, awesome.
They
Congratulations.
Just started and they are amazing.
I'm sure they are. And so what you're speaking to is a lot of the nature of scalability versus aggressive growth is that, do you have the foundations for scale? Because when you've got this level of traction and you employ multiple growth strategies at the same time and they work, there's a completely different growth rate that you achieve to anything that you've that's come before. And the fact that you're aware of that is the fact that, is our infrastructure correct, both in terms of our internal people structure as well as our IT architecture and infrastructure? Is that ready for scale? Then looking at that as, now it's post the 50-person mark, and now it's the meaningful point where it's no longer just a management team. Now you've got a leadership team. And you need people that are responsible for full-on functions within the business, which is looking at your marketing and sales, for example. So not only are we now investing in the growth engine, we've invested in operations, and we've invested in all the infrastructure around the business to ensure that both can happen in tandem. We've got the scalability that as we grow and as we turn these growth engines on, it can handle it. And not only that, is it also frees up the growth to be able to do that, because there's nothing worse than switching the engine on and then your customer experience just tanks because your processes and your business can't actually handle it.
100%. And so even now, yes, we've hired our head of sales and our head of marketing. And I mean, even in the short time that they've been here, you could see just the level of thinking that, is added. And yes, some of it's just, thank goodness, in addition to the groupthink that's maybe been formed, within the walls, but also from experience, right? Like they've seen what works and what doesn't. And they have the confidence and the wisdom to really, come cement and challenge ideas and try ideas. But even, within that's come in, and that also just raises the bar of excellence for everyone, right? So everyone has this push to kind of, well, okay, now I need to level up as well, which is awesome. Kind of which you just see has the ripple effects. But we, to your last point as well, right, to kind of really catch what's being brought in. At the moment, we're even hiring a head of customer, right? Because we've seen that. Yes, my co-founder and I, and predominantly, Hein, who's so good with kind of the operational and structure and strategic way of making things happen, has been owning that space. But it's really something that's going to need expertise further than what we have, right? We need to continue pushing the vision, continue pushing the growth, and thinking, okay, what next and where next? And we need people that can really own the catching and then the nurturing, kind of while they're being caught. into kind of not a place where it's just siloed, but in a place where they have the expertise to now communicate that within the various reliant structures that are out there, from product to marketing to then finance to then people to then our R&D team and the tech team and the finance. It's like it really does become a fun collaborative roller coaster, and something we actually just reminded ourselves of yesterday in our leadership meeting was there's gonna probably for the next 10 to 20 years be a tension of chaos versus process, and as long as we can enjoy it and realize that it's going to be there, not because we are delusional or because we are just unstructured, but because we're chasing what we're chasing. So it's that tension is going to be there, and if we can make peace with the tension being there because of a good reason and enjoy the tension, almost what's it saying, like you're not nervous, you're just excited. If we can see the tension as being excited for where we're growing, then I think you're gonna hopefully enter it in a more positive light when challenging it, when fighting for your position, et cetera, as opposed to being frustrated in it. So still a lot to learn, and I love our leadership team. We've hopefully come to a place where we're practicing radical candor, where we're practicing challenging from a place of good intent. But yes, those structures are something that no one teaches you, that no one can figure out, that there can be some models that you can try and replicate, but it's going to be different for each company. And what we've seen, especially in JOBJACK, right, because of our vision, because of the social impact we have, is the impact is a bit of a double-edged sword, right? You have amazing passion and amazing purpose, but with that you have a lot of opinion as well. And so to manage and not put out those flames of passion and those ideas and those opinions, but to nurture them and to channel them in the right way is something that I'm still figuring out, and it's something that our entire leadership team is reliant on, but reliant on not just getting, but also then facilitating in the right way.
100%. So Christiaan, on the topic of your leadership team that's gelling well together, this journey of learning that you're still on and going on, what does the next 18 months look like? The rest of 2024 going into 2025?
Growth. No, my CTO would strangle me. It is growth, but growth in what was Facebook's mantra was move fast and break things, and then it became move fast and break things with stable infrastructure. I think that's kind of where we are at the moment. We are not naive to the fact that if we want to grow to where we want to grow in 5 or 10 years, then we need to be aware of the fact that we can't necessarily reach where we want to reach within 12 months. We might get there in 18 months, but we need to have some space and respect in that, because that's going to create freedom for people to move with some more certainty. But we are not in any way, shape, or form conforming or settling for what the world sees as possible. I think our job as founders and leaders are to continue to press and get the most potential out of each person in our team, and hopefully rely on their hard enough pushback to tell us when it is really possible and when it really isn't. And so that's a dance that we're loving at the moment. And so the next let's call it 18 months really looks at just completing our end-to-end solution for our current clients and current market, which just really kind of creates a feedback loop of candidates and their success and performance within the companies, to be able to prove the long-term value. So just really cementing that stickiness, and then from there start dipping our toes into other industries, or that's less dipping toes and more hopefully kicking down a few doors, and then maybe dipping some toes in markets that are very much complementary with what we're experiencing in South Africa, on the back of our existing clients. But this is me not promising, because I know our team is going to listen to this and wanting to manage expectations, but everyone knows I'm very bullish about it. So as soon as we can get there with a confidence of we can actually excellently service this, then it's definitely something that we're not going to hold back to at least test or try.
Awesome. And I can't wait to keep following the journey. I love the fact that we keep having these little check-ins on the podcast, and I can't wait to discuss how the next growth strategies worked. Christiaan, you know the drill by now. The final question I have for you is, what's the one question that I haven't asked you that I should have asked you that you'd like to answer now?
First of all, Cameron, thanks so much for having me on again. I really, really enjoy our conversations as well. It always just gives me a good reflection of where we're at and where we've been. So I really appreciate the opportunity and the privilege of having these conversations with you. Thank you for that. I think something that's been sticking with me in this season. So I've got a 2.5-year-old boy. He's amazing, but he is 2, and there's a cliche around 2-year-olds. And I think a question that's not regularly asked is how are you a leader in your company by being a leader at home first? I think it's something that I'm confronted with on a daily basis, and I think that there's no direct answer for, but I think it's a question that needs to be asked more. So my opinion on that, or stance on that at the moment, is, one, I've not figured it out, but two, and it starts speaking to what I mentioned earlier with regards to your prioritization, and obviously also surrounding yourself with people that respect your values and where you are and see the long-term picture. Again, it's about thinking 15 or 20 years as opposed to 5 years, right? Is that we need to operate from a place of peace. Because if you're operating from a place of peace, then you more than likely really delivering excellent results, right? Because you're free to think, you're free to action, you're free to innovate, and you're free to try and try again. And so what I've realized, over the past few months, of 2 being the full epitome of a 2-year-old, is when you kind of not necessarily energized at home from a sleep perspective, or from a chill perspective, but you have the freedom to spend time with those that life is about, right? And whether it be intentional 2 hours from 5 to 7 or 6 to 8 with my boy, and an intentional 2 hours with my wife from 8 to 10. And sometimes they jumbled up, sometimes it doesn't happen. But I know I have the freedom to be able to do that from an expectation from our investors, my co-founder, and my team. Then I know I can really give my best from whatever working hours I'm doing, right? Whether it be 7 to 6, whether it be 8 to 5. And some days are less, some days are more. But I think that's something that I'm realizing is giving me so much more. It's giving the ability to give so much more, both at work and at home, because now I know I'm intentionally there for the people that I'm doing this for anyway, right? Which are my loved ones. And so they build up, one, not a resentment towards the mission that we're on, but a support for it and appreciation of it. And two, I'm being fulfilled in a way that no job or work or mission outside of your loved ones can ever give you. And so, I just wanted to leave that thought with everyone, is to make prioritization of where you are in your season, and to make peace with the fact that that prioritization is the right one, and to give yourself grace in that.
I love that. Thank you for the real talk throughout, especially at the end, reminding us all that it's still about being a human being at the end of the day. And if you want to build a really healthy business, you've got to be a healthy person to begin with. And I really, 100%. Really love that lesson and experience here. Christiaan, thank you so much for once again being on the Founder Files, and I can't wait to follow the rest of your growth journey.
Thanks, Cameron. Love being here, and well done on the awesome work that you guys are doing. It's incredible to see it.
I really do love chatting to Christiaan every time I get the chance, because I'm always walking away from our conversations feeling both inspired but also grounded, because I feel like that's the kind of human being that he is. He's very enthusiastic, he's very passionate, but he's got his feet firmly on the ground. And I think those are the combination of lessons that I want to take away from this episode. I mean, the first one being what I'll deem as practical patience. I mean, there are so many learnings that you need throughout your business journey, but you need to get right, specifically in the early stages, about your stakeholders. You need to deeply understand your users and then deeply understand your customers. You need to know who's going to be impacted by your solution and what impact this is going to have on them and their jobs. And then you need to show how your solution is going to improve business efficiencies, save costs, and ultimately improve profit. Without all of this, you can't have repeatable sales. So have the patience and determination to truly understand what value you're adding before you try to grow. Because at the end of the day, the whole reason why business exists and why it is allowed to exist is because of the value that it adds to its stakeholders. Then next, when you do grow, be very intentional about who you bring on board. I think that's a massive lesson that Christiaan shared here. And that's something they've done very well, whether that's their investors, whether that's their leaders, the key people that they bring on board, the view is to do it for the long run. They're making sure that they're getting the right institutional partners that want to support them and see them successful and achieve their vision. They're getting on leaders right now who they know that they can trust with the capabilities to be bought into their business and also push back, and realizing that we can't do this alone, we need to do this together. And also going back to the point of patience and I guess foresight is that they're doing this before they desperately need these partners so that they've got the freedom to be able to work together with them strategically instead of chaotically. And I think that makes a huge difference. And finally, I want to put a special spotlight on Christiaan's final comments around being a husband and a father. I mean, at the end of the day, we are human beings before we are human doings. And if you are nurturing your relationships, your health, and your well-being, or at least if you're not doing that, then you will suffer, the people around you will suffer, and your business will suffer. At the end of the day, if you're living a healthy life and a meaningful life and being a healthy person, then naturally this will transition into your business in terms of building a healthy business and showing up productively. Because if you can't arrive present, energized, and from a place of peace, as Christiaan puts it, then you're not going to be making decisions from a place of peace. You're not going to be strategizing from a place of peace, and you're not going to be growing from a place of peace. And I think that fundamentally makes a huge difference, not only in terms of the results your business achieves, but in your entire enjoyment of the journey at the end of the day and why the hell we're doing this in the first place. So on that note, thank you so much for listening to this episode. Please remember to follow and subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube, and engage with us on Instagram, TikTok, and LinkedIn. Let me know what lessons you've taken away from the episode and who you want to hear from next. But until next time, cheers.